1897. Switzerland. A man stands before a crowded hall and says something no one takes seriously. He says, within 50 years there will be a Jewish state. His name is Theodor Herzl. He will be dead within 7 years, and he will be right. But what he does not say, what no one says in that hall, is what happens to the people already living in the land he is talking about. This is the story of how a promise created a nation, and how that same promise tore another world apart. At the end of the 19th century, Palestine is a province of the Ottoman Empire. It has been home to Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, and a small Jewish community for generations. Life is not easy, but it is life, and it belongs to the people who live it. Then, two things happen, almost simultaneously, that will change everything. The first is the rise of Jewish nationalism, called Zionism. After centuries of persecution across Europe, pogroms in Russia, discrimination in France, exclusion everywhere, Jewish intellectuals begin asking a radical question. What if we had our own country? The second thing is that the Ottoman Empire, the old giant that rules Palestine, is dying. And the great powers of Europe are already circling, deciding who gets what. Palestine is caught between two forces it did not choose and could not stop. If you're the kind of person who wants to understand the Middle East, not just today's headlines, but the full story of how it became what it is, subscribe to Front Archives. Stay with me. November 2nd, 1917. The British Foreign Secretary, Arthur James Balfour, sends a letter. 1 page, 67 words. It promises British support for, quote, a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It also says, in the same letter, that nothing shall be done to harm the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. Both promises in the same document. Historians would spend the next century arguing about what that actually meant. The Arabs of Palestine are not consulted. The letter is called the Balfour Declaration, and it becomes, depending on who you ask, either the founding miracle of a nation or the original wound of a people. Between 1882 and 1939, Jewish immigrants arrive in Palestine in waves. They come from Russia, from Poland, from Germany, from everywhere persecution has roots. They buy land legally, mostly from absentee Ottoman landlords at market prices. But when they arrive on the land, the farmers who work it, the Arab fellahin, find themselves displaced. No one intended a catastrophe. But good intentions and historic necessity are not always the same thing as justice. By 1922, Jews represent 11% of Palestine's population. By 1936, that number is 28%, and rising. The Arab majority watches its future being rewritten by people who believe with equal conviction that this is their ancient homeland. Two peoples, one land, and a collision course neither can stop. 1936. The Arab population goes on strike. It lasts 6 months, the longest general strike in the history of the British Empire. Then it turns into an armed revolt. Palestinian Arabs attack British forces and Jewish settlements. The British respond with overwhelming force. According to historical records, The Arab Revolt costs the lives of over 5,000 Palestinians, 500 Jews, and several hundred British soldiers over 3 years. The British, exhausted and politically cornered, do something that will haunt history. They issue the White Paper of 1939. It dramatically limits Jewish immigration to Palestine, just 15,000 people per year for 5 years. Exactly when Europe's Jews need somewhere to go the most. Because 6 million of them are about to be murdered. And the gates of the one land that promised them a home are being closed. Between 1941 and 1945, Nazi Germany systematically murders 6 million Jews. 1/3 of the entire Jewish population of the world. When the camps are liberated and the world sees the photographs, the crematoriums, the mass graves, the skeletal survivors, something shifts permanently. The moral case for a Jewish state becomes, for much of the Western world, unanswerable. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish survivors have nowhere to go. European countries don't want them back. The United States severely limits entry, and the British still restrict immigration to Palestine. So the survivors get on boats anyway. Illegal boats, overcrowded, rotting ships. And the British intercept them at sea. The image of British soldiers turning away Holocaust survivors, broadcast around the world, is a moral catastrophe for the empire. The world is watching, and the world is changing its mind. In Palestine, Jewish underground militias have been growing for years. The Haganah, the Irgun, the Lehi. They don't agree on everything, but they agree on one thing: the British need to leave. In July 1946, the Irgun, led by a man named Menachem Begin, a future Nobel Peace Prize winner, bombs the British administrative headquarters inside the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. 91 people die. Arab workers, British officers, Jewish employees. The bomb doesn't distinguish. Neither does history. Britain, exhausted by World War II and hemorrhaging money and moral authority, decides it has had enough. In February 1947, the British government announces it is handing the Palestine question to the newly formed United Nations. They have been in Palestine for 30 years. They leave without a solution. Just a problem they made larger, and a United Nations that will have to decide what comes next. November 29th, 1947. The United Nations votes on a plan to divide Palestine into 2 states. One Jewish, one Arab. Jerusalem, considered holy by 3 religions, would be under international administration. The Jewish leadership accepts. The Arab states reject it. They argue the plan gives 56% of the land to Jews, who at that point represent 33% of the population. The math, they say, is not fair. The Jewish leaders say it is the only offer on the table, and that after the Holocaust, a state is not a luxury. It is survival. The UN adopts Resolution 181, and the countdown begins. In the months between the vote and May 1948, violence engulfs Palestine. Jewish militias and Arab fighters clash across the country. According to historical records and multiple sources, between 400,000 and 700,000 Palestinians flee or are driven from their homes. They call it the Nakba, the Catastrophe. May 14th, 1948. Tel Aviv, a museum hall. David Ben-Gurion stands beneath a portrait of Theodore Herzl, the man who made the prediction exactly 51 years ago. And at precisely 4 p.m., he reads a declaration, /. The State of Israel is established. Within 11 minutes, the United States recognizes it. Within hours, the Soviet Union follows. Within 1 day, Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon declare war. The Arab armies march into Palestine. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War begins. Israelis call it the War of Independence. Palestinians call it the Nakba. Both names are accurate. Because the same event, in the same geography, in the same week, was simultaneously a birth and a catastrophe, depending on which side of the line you were standing on. By the time armistice agreements are signed in 1949, Israel controls 78% of historic Palestine. The West Bank falls under Jordanian control. Gaza falls under Egyptian control. The Palestinian state the UN had planned never comes into existence. And 700,000 Palestinians remain in exile, waiting for a return that 76 years later has still not come. Theodore Herzl was right. 51 years after his prediction, there is a Jewish state, built by people who had survived the unsurvivable, and built on a land where another people had built their lives. This is not a story with heroes and villains. It is a story of two peoples, two traumas, and one land. And it is not over. Subscribe to Front Archives right now, because this is part 1 of a 6-part series on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We are going to follow this story all the way to today. And next episode, 6 days that changed the Middle East forever. Israel versus Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. A war that lasted less than a week and created the world we live in. Don't miss it. History does not end. Neither does the archive. Subscribe to Front Archives and keep history alive.